I'm Ricky.
And I'm Joe, and this is Season 8, Episode 3 of the Beer and Broadband Podcast, slated to come out on April 28th, 2025. And while we're doing this podcast, I also had done some brewing, last year while we were doing it. And one of the things that I brewed last year was this 2024 ginger beer, because I wanted a little bit of ginger beer to have some, like, dark and stormies and stuff like that. This did not turn out the way I expected it to. Now, normally I like my ginger beer very gingery, like super bitey gingery. And I also like for it to be, 7-8% ABV. So it's a little bit higher on that scale. It's like a stout ginger beer,
Yeah.
if there is such a thing. And I like for it to be a little bit, I don't care that it's a little bit thin, because ginger beer generally is a little bit thin. But I like for it to be a little bit extra carbonated. This one, low carbonation, not super gingery in my taste, and like it's just it's a fine ginger beer, but it tastes like the first one that I made a long time ago. So all right, anyways, I gave my impression about it first, because I haven't even drank it and I know it's like that.
Yeah, it is 100% like that. It's very light. It really tastes more like a light ginger tea than it does a ginger beer. However, because it's so light, and it doesn't really have a lot of off flavors, like it's brewed well.
Yeah.
What I might do with this, instead of actually drinking it, it would be great to replace the water if you wanted to make like a ginger syrup.
I could see that.
So like that might be a good thing to make and put in your cocktail kit, because it doesn't have a non-existent ginger flavor, right? And especially once you concentrated it down by making it into a syrup, it would stick out a little bit more. It would have that sweetness for when you want to put a little bit of ginger in something, So it's, and I should say, it's not a bad ginger beer. Like, you can buy better in a store, but you can also buy worse in a store.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, put this in a soda stream, and it's a good low sugar ginger ale.
Yeah.
It's that level of ginger. It's not quite ginger beer, but it's ginger ale level. And like, it just needs the carbonation, and you'll be fine.
Well, it needs a more punchy ginger flavor too for me. Like,
I think for a ginger beer, yeah, but you could absolutely put some erythritol in this, blast it with CO2, and that's a ginger ale.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Nice little, like a not your Foster's ginger ale or something like that, like a little bit of alcohol in it.
Yeah, I think though I don't like to put erythritol and stuff like that in it, because I don't want to sweeten it up whenever I do this. I want it to be dry, because I want to make cocktails with it. I mean, generally I make dark and stormies with this stuff. Sometimes I'll drink it like on the back porch, but I like it like this. I'm making this for me, right? I'm not making it for somebody else. The problem with this one, and I made a friend of ours, their a mead. I made a ginger mead for them. The ginger I used the right amount and everything. It just was like not potent.
Yeah, really. And that's hard with store-bought ginger. I've actually thought about growing my own ginger, because it's so easy for that exact reason.
Right.
Is that ginger loses its potency so quickly. Or I should say, it doesn't actually lose it that quickly, but it is so hard to tell in a store-bought whether or not it will be pungent without like peeling some of the skin back, which is like a little bit of like you don't want to do that in a grocery store.
Right.
You don't want to be that person that ruins a piece of ginger because you like peeled a whole bunch of bark off of it to smell and see how potent it was, right? So yeah, I can see that. Just the batch you had just was a little bit older, or wasn't quite fully like ripe yet.
Yeah, something like that happened. And I got it. I took it home. I checked it out, because I would have just went and used this to cook and bought like some. It seemed all right, all up until the point. And like Chris and I, like, were brewing. We made this together.
Yeah.
We sat down. Like, I was just like, I don't know what happened. Everything seemed right. We had the right amount of ginger. He went back out, like, while we were doing the brew day. I stayed and did some stuff when we were doing the secondary for this, and he went out and got more. I found more stuff in the house. We put it in both batches. It just didn't take. So like, next time I'm gonna make another one, probably May time period sometime. I'm gonna try to make another one in some cider, and I'm gonna see if I can get a gingery ginger beer this time in 2025. But my 2024 ginger beer, not so good. Not so good.
I wonder if next time, because I'm assuming you probably slice it up and put in ginger slices. right?
No, I put it in chunks.
Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. But that's what I'm getting at. It's large physical pieces.
Yeah.
I wonder if next time, if things go well in the primary, you don't need it. But if you get in that situation again that like you're going into secondary, it's still not quite right. I wonder if it's worth just putting in a food processor and just keep adding ginger until you get it concentrated to the level that hits the way you want, and then putting it in and just dealing with the sediment. Because most of that should fall out of suspension. Because the fiber is going to float to the top, everything else is going to float to the bottom. So like you'll have a little bit more loss, but you'll get that flavor because you can just taste it right away.
Right.
Because it's hard to like judge how much ginger you're going to get in a chunk or in a slice, unless you like eat the whole slice. But even then, that's a little hard too because of how different it can taste as a raw ginger on your tongue versus what gets extracted out.
I wonder if I can make a ginger extract though, like using that same sort of methodology, and then just run it through some cheesecloth.
Yeah, if you have a strong enough solvent, like if you want to get like a bunch of high proof vodka or something like that.
That's what I'm thinking. Like use some high proof rum or vodka, and just like take that, like put a big mason jar full of like ground up ginger in it, and see, and then maybe use that to like gingerize a ginger beer that's like a little. I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna buy a ton of ginger in May, and just make like a 2-gallon batch of ginger beer, and then make a basically some sort of a limbic or something like that.
Yeah. That's how I get my raspberry extracts for some stuff that I put in. Is I just get a bunch of frozen raspberries and a bunch of high proof vodka, and let it like seep for a week.
Yeah, that might be the thing, and then I can just taste it as it goes. And so, I mean, I do that for my the spicy mead things that I make.
Yeah. Well, actually, if you're thinking
Mouse.
about making ginger mead, you maybe want to start with like something like a June bug, where like you're basically taking ginger, adding it directly to the honey. That'll start a fermentation process, and then put that in, because the honey having such a high sugar content will do a much better job of extracting out the ginger. It basically like desiccates it, and then at the end, what you end up getting is a really gingery honey, which might help. But then also essentially candied ginger. So like it's a 2-for-1 thing.
Yeah, so you do the candied gingered honey thing, and then you do like your regular ginger beer type base, put the honey in for your sweetener and your fermentation stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, I'll try that. That sounds like a good idea. So, all right, troubleshooting live on Beer and Broadband. Not really live, we're not live, but troubleshooting together on Beer and Broadband how to make better ginger beer. I've got a couple of good suggestions. Now they're down for posterity. I'll go back, write them up, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, that'd be a fun little experiment.
Yeah.
We can make it like 3 different ways or something like that and see what works.
Yeah, maybe one day in May we'll just like get together and do it, and then we can talk about like the process. Okay, that sounds good. So let's talk about local LLMs and image generation specifically right now. So you have Google has Gemma or Gemini. And I think it's at Gemma 3 right now. And then you have Deepseek R1. We're not going to talk about anything that's not running locally. So nothing that's like in the cloud, nothing that's like that. I mean, you can run these things in that. We're not talking about OpenAI stuff. We could talk about Llama 2 if we wanted to, because Llama's pretty good at this point. I mean, really all 3 of these have gotten good. But I'm running a local AI for like an LLM for like just being able to ask like a voice assistant. My goal with this is to tie that to my voice assistant that I've got running through Home Assistant, which is using the Nabu Casa open voice assistant thing. I want to run that and then have it replace like Google or Gemini or anything like that that's running in the cloud. With a bunch of like processing power to be able to like give me feedback and do things and have context and stuff like that. Because right now, just running on just my Raspberry Pi, it's not exactly like doing great, but I can tie it into my LLM. I've had some experiences. You aren't running LLMs at your house though, but you're running image generation. I've also got an image generation thing here. So let's talk about that first, and then I'll talk about my experience with the LLM. How about that? So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing right now with your image generation.
Right now I have a Stable Diffusion run preloaded with some models for a couple different art sets. I mostly use it for like picture enhancement. So I'll like feed a picture in. So like I once took like some pictures of me and my ex-wife from when we were older, and kind of like back aged them to like when we were younger and stuff like that, and going back and forth, like taking some like memorable moments and like putting them through like another light and stuff like that. And I do a lot of, we play D&D and stuff like that. I love to like make little characters and stuff like that. And I've been playing around with trying to get a good like photorealistic, like if this was like an actual person. And it's been a little while since I've done that one. Like the new train models are coming out all the time.
Yeah.
Wow, and some of the stuff is really nice. I've played a little bit with like animation and the movie stuff, but not too extensively. So I'd say that's more of something I'm like dipping my feet into. I'm spending a lot of time focusing on trying to get like good image prompts and things like that. Yeah. And it's been really nice because it's like, I like to like character craft. Like I make characters all the time. In fact, I need to talk with one of our D&D players. I completely forgot to reach out to them yesterday to talk about a character they might be introducing. So maybe I'll make some art for that or something to that nature. So yeah, it's good stuff. I still kind of stand firm. I don't think it replaces a lot of like talented artist art. But when you want a picture of something that you wouldn't pay even $10 for, it's good for that. It's very good for that.
I mean, I agree with that. Like, I'm not even going to go down as a person who creates their own artwork and who can do, like, if I want to make a portrait of something, I can make my own portrait. It takes me maybe 4 hours and I've got it done. If I want to do it in color pencil or crayon or whatever, I can do that. If I want to paint it, I can do that. I can do that myself. I'm going to get a better quality image out of what I can do than what one of these things can do. But sometimes I don't want to do that. Yeah. Sometimes I just want something that's going to come out real quick to be, like a little goblin. And I want to have like a little vicious goblin with knife hands to throw up in my D&D chat. I'm not going to go like get some artist and pay them, $30 or something like that to make it. I'm using it like, and I don't know who's it's trained off of, anything like that, but I'm using it for profit. I would have probably searched the internet for goblin with knife hands, found something that was close, say, hey, this is a goblin, but it's got knife hands. I might have even like, photoshopped over like really crudely some knife hands onto the goblin.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great replacement for the just like trolling through Google Images.
Exactly.
And I think another thing I like about it, especially if you're not an artist yourself, is it's almost like a collaborative process in the sense that like your first image is never right. But oftentimes what I'll find is when I'm on like the second or third revision, something shows up that I really like that I hadn't thought about. And it's like, ooh, okay, write that into the prompt. I want more of that.
Right.
And eventually you land on that thing that it's generally never perfect, but it's good enough. Maybe the legs are a little weird. Crop off the legs. Yeah. I don't have legs in that photo. And like, you're good to go.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know that I would ever use AI art for anything that was published.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Well, I might. It depends on what it's trained on and what I'm using it for, and like sort of things like that. So, like, say maybe generating a map. Like, I give it some parameters. I'm gonna publish a adventure module for D&D, and I generate a map using it. I don't see anything wrong with that. If I am going to claim that the artwork's like my original artwork, or I'm not going to, like, I've done like 2 or 3 of these, I've gotten popular and I'm not hiring artists at that point, that's a little bit scummy. Yeah. But you're just getting out, you're just trying to like do stuff, like your first iteration of something, getting a feel for things. Maybe. I don't really see that being a big problem. And I see that like where things like these LLMs shine. And like the ones locally, because they're not feeding some big corporations greed and all sorts of, and I know they train these things, they put their resources into it and all that other stuff, but not everybody does. Like some people have developed these things, they do like a weight on it or something like that, they buy some like time in a data center, they maybe feed their own artwork into it, and then they're like, here, go have fun with this. Those are the sort of things that I see actually being like completely cool to do stuff like that with.
Yeah. I can see that too. Yeah, like if you're training it off of all ethically sourced stuff and you know it's ethically sourced, then yeah, that's a different conversation.
Well, there's no real way to know that it's ethically sourced for the base model. So, but I think what I'm saying is, as a person who knows that it doesn't always matter what the source model is based on when you're doing. So, like, if I'm doing, let's say I take Deepseek R1, and I want it to spit me back a whole bunch of information about documentation in my home lab that I've written. It doesn't really matter what the Deepseek model was trained on. It could be trained on William Shakespeare's unabridged works and every technical document that's ever been written by Cisco and every technical document that's ever been written by IBM and a bunch of copyrighted technical documents that are on O'Reilly. Doesn't really matter because I'm not ever asking it about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm ever asking it about are the documents that I have, and it's locked down to be able to not talk to anything else or do anything else. Whereas if I'm running it in the cloud or I'm doing something like that and I'm trying to like make it give me information about what's the best way to configure a IBM, one of IBM's servers, or something like that, to do a particular task, and that's something that's written in a O'Reilly document that's like copyrighted and stuff like that, then that becomes a problem, I think. And I think we're starting to see that like as a clear delineation between these like things. Now, that is a little bit of a naive thing to say, but I'm talking about running it on my own stuff. And even if like I'm going to publish this like for a YouTube channel and say, hey, this is how I did this and this is how you do it and stuff like that, I think that's less of a problem than if I'm going to go out here and I'm going to take that same model and just use it to feed me back any information about anything that I want to do. And I've got like some sort of support network that I'm setting up for people. And that's what's going to like do the tech support, for people. Like, so you've got a couple of tech support agents that can ask these things so they don't have to do research.
Yeah.
Then that's like, you're profiting off of something. You're not paying the O'Reilly subscription. You're not paying for the book from the author or anything like that. So you're kind of just using it, at that point in time. And I think there is a difference between the two. Anyways, going back to the D&D example, because I think that's much less. If you're talking about getting art and you're just saying, hey, I'm going to generate some art for this like module thing that I'm going to do like the first time or whatever, I don't think that that's that big of a deal. I think it's if you start to become popular or something like that, or you're using art that like you're specifically saying, hey, I want art in this artist's art style, like Studio Ghibli or something like that.
Yeah.
That starts to become a problem if you're not paying for a license to Studio Ghibli, which, OpenAI kind of doing that right now.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Does that make sense?
100%.
Okay. So yeah, image generation, lots of fun to play around with. I don't know. I kind of derailed there. I went on a bunny rabbit trail.
No, you're fine. But yeah, so local models. I know we were talking about Gemini and Deepseek version 1.
Gemini, Deepseek R1,
Yeah,
and we can talk about Llama too as like a...
Yeah. I've got no experience with Llama, so you can talk anything you want. But I did see those two in the notes. So I went and read a bunch of articles, and actually there's a lot of good ones that are just like side-by-side comparisons. Like, here's the prompt, here's what they both did. And it was a very interesting comparison because Gemini is significantly faster.
Yeah.
When run locally. I mean, most of the time, like through all these prompts, I've looked at dozens of them. Sometimes it was a small increase of only 20%. 20% is the small increase. Sometimes multiple 100% faster. There was one prompt that took Gemini a sixth of the time that it took Deepseek. But from my experience looking through these, it looks like Deepseek is accurate more often.
Yep.
And frankly, I liked the responses from Deepseek a lot better, especially because I found one that went into STEM. So like I was a physics major, I did a lot of physics. And I got very lucky that some of the prompts that were given were for things that I had to do in school, like calculating positions of satellites and stuff like that. So I've done that stuff manually, and there were some decent differences. When Jim and I would go through, it would get close to the right answer. I think the worst I saw was it was like 15% off.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously way too far off to use for like any actual stem. You're not going to have a 15-second tolerance on something you're sending into space. But at the same time, if you're just casually looking for stuff, it's not that far off.
Right.
But Deepseek explains it a lot better. Deepseek's always had the right units. Is another thing that Jim and I got. I didn't like a lot. Its math was correct for the units it had, but it wasn't using the standard units. So like it was using kilometers per second instead of meters per second,
right,
and stuff like that. So I think ultimately it kind of depends on what you want to use it for. But I will say there is something to be said about it 6 times as fast in some instances. If you're casually using it and you don't need hyper precision, and maybe you just need the answer, you don't need the explanation it tries to give you. I just want to know the thing. Fast can be good.
I agree. My experience has been Gemma's faster. Deepseek is a little bit slower, but it gives you the reasoning that it has for everything, so you understand why it thought that, and you can say, no, you made a mistake here.
Yeah, and its reasoning is much better. Like Jim and I also gave its reasoning for doing things, but it wasn't as verbose, it wasn't as well explained.
Right.
And sometimes the explanation didn't really match what it was doing.
Right.
Like not in a completely nonsensical way, but it would be like asking someone who's done it once to explain it versus asking someone who's done it 100 times to explain it.
But if I wanted something to turn off the lights in my house, Gemma works really well for that. I don't know that Deepseek is the right choice, and I've been playing around with both of them to do that. Sometimes Gemma will be like, "I've turned off the lights in the living room," and then just won't turn off the lights in the office. But I can work that stuff out as I play with it, kind of. Where Deepseek is more like, what lights? I don't have the ability to look at any lights. There aren't any lights to find in my I need to think about what lights are. It just kind of goes to this whole cyclical thing, and then it's like, no, I can't do that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, my experience with running the two of them from a technical perspective is if I ask Deepseek a math question, what is 2 plus 2 plus 10 plus 12 plus 15 divided by 35, it gives me an accurate answer every time. And tells me why it's the accurate answer. It'll say, order of operations is this, you're supposed to do this is what happens, this is what ends up. I haven't done any advanced math with it, but just basic math, even up to calculus, it'll do. And Gemma gets that stuff right sometimes, and sometimes it'll add weird stuff into it.
Yeah.
But it's more like if I went to my teenager and asked, how do you do this math problem? I get results like that from Gemma. Where if I'm going to an adult that works in math, I get results from Deepseek.
Yeah.
And I think that's they're really good models. I mean, Llama's the same way. Llama is more like Gemma, but it's a little bit slower. But it's more thorough in how it reasons through things, and it can do more. So it does image recognition and stuff like that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I saw that on the comparison. It is doing more stuff, and it's doing it faster. And in that realm of kind of just like we were talking about stable diffusion, you're using it for the cheap throwaway art. I think Gemma can fit in there pretty well.
Yeah.
You shouldn't, if you need to be super accurate about your space calculations, don't ask AI.
Yeah. That's not what you should be doing.
Yeah, I do like the language style of, Deepseek a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. If you're doing something that's more transactional, like turn off my lights, make this image, stuff like that, I think it probably does suit pretty well, especially because, our computers are not running weak GPUs.
Actually, the one that I'm running my LLM it's the oldest computer that I have with the lowest GPU. I just want to see what would happen.
There you go.
And it's returning stuff at a decent pace. So.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of where I was getting at. The being 6 times faster matters a little bit less when you're still saying it only took a couple seconds.
Right.
It's the difference between 1 second and 6 seconds. It's not the end of the world. But if you're trying to run this on a Raspberry Pi or something that's not very powerful, now you're saying, okay, well, maybe it's the difference between 10 seconds and a minute.
Yeah.
Right? And that does matter a lot more.
Yep.
So I can definitely see the place for both of them. But I got to give, and there wasn't a single article that I read that said that, apart from speed, that Gemma was as good as Deepseek. And
it's not as good as Deepseek.
I can see that. But also sometimes you don't need the best.
Yeah.
You need lightweight. And if lightweight is what you need, it looks like it performs good enough.
It does. It's not something at work and at other business type functions, we talk about like these sort of things. So I'm using this as like lab learning, so I can understand how this works in the back end, and I can be a little bit better about writing prompts and things like that, and kind of instruct other people to be able to do that. And then also, like, maybe one day we're going to have like voice assistants that we can use like through like our local chat bots or something like that. I'd want to be able to, how do I leverage that, kind of be knowledgeable of that. That's why I'm like kind of doing these experiments. Plus I want to de-Googlify myself essentially. So looking at these things, I am 100% convinced that I would use Deepseek or something like it for documentation, being able to give me information back from a document. That's similar to what we're doing with something that we've got going on. So like it makes a whole lot of sense. Like how this is working, I understand better. This is how you write a prompt for it. I can like kind of do that. Like this is how you get information back from that documentation. I can kind of do that. But if I'm trying to get it to, I don't know, do something like actually be part of an automation, never. Not in a million years at the way it is right now. Now in 10 years or 5 years or 2 years or a year, maybe they'll be so much better because they iterate so fast, right? But not right now. Not right now. Not with either one of these. I like some of the things I was like, oh, I'm about to unleash this onto my home automation system. I don't know about that. That seems like a bad idea. I'm going to put some containers around this to make sure this doesn't just like open the garage door, unlock all the doors, and release the dogs out to the world, or set fire to the house or something like that. They can't do that, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
These things are, it's a little scary. Change is a little bit scary, but I think it's more like, when they started with assembly lines and making like barrels and things like that, and they got rid of like the barrel write jobs, right? Yeah. I think we're in a state like that with LLMs. That we're discovering what we can do with these things. We're discovering how we can assemble, how we can automate, how we can do these sorts of things. And some of it's a little bit scary. It's not as good a quality as it was when people were doing it by hand, but it's good enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, why are we talking about this though? Why does that matter? And I think it's the last thing that I said. Every company is going to be looking to do this, and either you're going to be someone that knows how to leverage these things to do good work, or you're going to be someone who has no idea, and you're just like, I want to do it the traditional way, and then you're looking for a job.
Yeah.
Moral implications aside of like all the, hey, we can steal it, but you can't, kind of stuff with copyrighted material. The learning of the technology is really cool. And it's something that everyone should be doing if you're a technical person, I think. Not just using Copilot.
Yeah, that's true. There's nothing wrong with Copilot, but you're right. You got to take it a step further. Like actually, especially if you're someone listening to this podcast for technology, maybe you work in the IT field, you need to know how it works. You don't have to be able to make it, but just like, if you work on a call center somewhere, supporting networks, supporting laptops, you don't have to know how to program Windows, but you do have to know how to run Windows really well and fix it if it's having problems. And I think in the AI world, the fix it is being able to craft really good prompts and fix broken prompts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or know why it gave, like, correct something when it gives, like, a weird answer or something like that. Do you have anything else you want to say about that? Because I want to talk about something else.
No, I think I'm good on that topic.
Okay. So, I like to run containers. I specifically run, like, this Docker instance that has, like, a Jellyfin instance, and it runs this thing called Heimdall that's like a static homepage, and then it gives me, like, all these, like, other things. Like, I run a setup for forgetting right now what it is, what all my different instances are. But like I basically lost everything. So I had like a change IO or and a chow down like instance and like a bunch of other things like that. And there was like Grokky for making grocery lists and stuff. And I basically lost everything because I had to like I ran out of space on my main SSD for my server. So I had to like go replace it and like drop some stuff out because like basically I run Plex on there and a couple of other things. And because all that stuff's running on there, it ends up like filling up with a bunch of metadata.
Yeah.
So this huge amount of metadata, huge amount of like container data, not like the actual physical like media data or anything like that, but just stuff was generated there. And it went up to, I thought I was fine with a terabyte. I had to go buy a 2 terabyte one.
Gotcha.
And now I'm going to have to like figure out how to like kind of move some of those services off just to kind of keep that from happening, you know, like move it to something that I can expand to a larger, mount it to maybe a hard drive or a 4 terabyte like SSD or something like that, you know, like make it like a much bigger thing so I can like kind of keep that from like ballooning as much as it was. So that's a problem I'll come back to a little bit later. But back up your containers, folks.
Yeah.
Back up your containers. Because I thought I was doing just enough because I use Portainer for like an easy GUI. I thought I backed everything up using Portainer. No. When I went to restore it, I was like, why is that not there? And then like I tried to back them up because I still had like the old SSD in it, and it didn't take. And like I had lost too much data, something had went wrong, and now I'm having to rebuild the whole thing. So don't do what I did. Back all your stuff up. Just a reminder, everyone, back your stuff up.
Just in case.
Yeah, it's not a suggestion. It's a must do. All right, guys. This has been Season 8, Episode 3 of the Beer and Broadband Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. This is slated to come out on April 28th, 2025. And we're going to go. We'll see you next time.